I woke to the sharp smell of damp and mildew, the kind of stench that clings to the air like a bad memory. My body ached, as though I'd spent days curled into myself on the uneven mattress beneath me. The faint glow of a swinging light bulb illuminated the peeling wallpaper of the room-faded florals smeared with dark stains that I didn't want to examine too closely. The rain outside was relentless, hammering against the lone window as thunder rolled through the unseen landscape. For a long moment I didn't move. My mind felt sluggish, as though waking up from a dream I couldn't remember. Then a sound shattered the silence, a scream sharp and desperate, cutting through the storm. Instinct took over. I bolted upright, heart racing, and looked around for anything to defend myself with. The room was bare, aside from the rickety bed and a small wooden dresser whose drawers hung open, empty. My clothes were soaked with sweat, though the air was cold enough to make my breath visible. That scream had come from close by, too close. I stood on trembling legs and approached the door. It creaked open with a protesting groan, revealing a dimly lit hallway that stretched endlessly in both directions. The corridor looked worse than the room. Faded red carpeting was torn in patches, exposing warped wooden planks. Faint, flickering lights dangled from fraying wires, casting erratic shadows on the walls. There were no windows, just doors, dozens of them lined up like sentinels. My pulse quickened as I glanced at the scrap of paper in my hand, one I hadn't noticed until now. The words were scrawled in uneven, trembling handwriting. Find the exit. Trust no one. A faint rustling sound came from behind me. I spun around, half expecting to see someone or something lurking there. The hallway was empty, but the sound didn't stop. It was like footsteps, shuffling unevenly. I backed away slowly, my throat dry and my palms slick. Before I could call out, a door to my left creaked open. A man stumbled out, tall and broad-shouldered, his face pale beneath a scruffy beard. He froze when he saw me, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice cracking. He stared at me, his eyes wide with confusion, and then held up a piece of paper identical to mine. "Jacob," he muttered, his voice rough. I don't know how I got here." Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. The scream echoed again, louder this time, followed by a low guttural sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Jacob tensed, his hand darting toward his belt, as if reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Together, we ventured down the hallway, our footsteps muffled by the threadbare carpet. The sound of the scream faded, replaced by the steady hum of fluorescent lights struggling to stay on. We passed door after door, each marked with a tarnished brass number. They felt wrong somehow, as though the numbers didn't belong to the doors they were on. We didn't dare open any of them. The air grew colder with each step, and I could feel Jacob's unease as sharply as my own. We turned a corner and nearly collided with a young girl standing in the middle of the hallway. She looked no older than 16. Her dark hair tied into a loose braid. She was clutching a small flashlight and glaring at us like we'd just crawled out of the walls. "Don't come any closer," she warned, her voice trembling despite the defiance in her tone. Jacob and I exchanged a glance. "We're not here to hurt you," I said gently, raising my hands. "We're trying to figure out what's going on." She hesitated, then lowered the flashlight slightly. "Mia," she said, introducing herself. "I woke up here. I don't know why. And then I heard noises." Her eyes darted around the hallway nervously. She had a note, too. its edges crumpled from how tightly she'd been gripping it. Before we could respond, another door creaked open farther down the hall. A man stepped out, older than the rest of us, with grey-streaked hair and an air of calm that felt unnatural in this chaos. "Dr. Samuel Green," he introduced himself, his voice smooth and measured. He looked us over with the detached curiosity of someone studying an experiment. "I assume you've all found these?" He held up his own note, cryptic instructions, no explanation. A rather cruel game, don't you think? Jacob scowled, clearly not trusting him. But I couldn't help noticing the way Dr. Green's gaze lingered on the walls, as if he knew something we didn't. Before we could press him further, the lights above us flickered violently, casting the hallway into near darkness. A sound echoed through the corridor, something heavy dragging across the floor. My stomach twisted as the temperature plummeted, and a shadow shifted at the far end of the hallway. It wasn't the kind of shadow cast by light, but something darker, something solid. The four of us froze, watching as it moved closer. "Run," Jacob said, his voice barely above a whisper. None of us argued. We turned and sprinted down the hallway, our footsteps pounding against the floor as the dragging sound grew louder. Doors blurred past us, each one identical and each one locked when we tried the handles. The hallway seemed endless, looping back on itself no matter which direction we turned. Panic clawed at my chest as the shadow loomed closer, taking on a shape that made my mind recoil. We burst into a larger room. A lobby, perhaps, though it looked as decayed as the rest of the hotel. The once grand chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, its crystals coated in grime. A staircase spiraled upward into darkness, and a massive mirror on the far wall reflected our terrified expressions. For a moment, I thought we'd lost a shadow, but then I saw it in the mirror, closer than it should have been. I couldn't stop staring at the mirror. The shadow was there, impossibly close, its shape shifting as if it were made of smoke and tar. But when I turned to look behind us, the hallway was empty. My hands trembled as I reached out to touch the glass. The reflection rippled, distorting our faces and making the room feel smaller, suffocating. Jacob grabbed my wrist and pulled me back. "Don't," he growled. "It's a trick. Whatever that thing is, it's messing with us." The dragging sound returned, louder this time, echoing from the hallway we'd just fled. Mia backed away, her face pale and her hands clutching the flashlight like it was a lifeline. "What is that thing?" she whispered. None of us answered, because none of us knew. Dr. Green stepped forward, his calm facade cracking as he examined the room. His eyes lingered on the mirror, then on a door to the right, marked with an ornate symbol I didn't recognize. "There," he said, pointing to the door. "We need to go through there." Jacob narrowed his eyes. "How do you know?" Dr. Green hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for doubt to take root. "I don't," he admitted, "but standing here won't save us." Reluctantly, we followed his lead. The door groaned as it opened, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. A faint, musty breeze wafted up, carrying with it the scent of decay. The stairs seemed to go on forever, the air growing colder with each step. My heart pounded as we descended, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the confined space. The flashlight beam flickered, casting long shadows on the stone walls. Mia kept glancing behind us, her fear palpable. "What if it's following us?" she asked, her voice shaking. "It is," Jacob said grimly. I can feel it. I wanted to argue, to reassure her, but deep down I knew he was right. At the bottom of the stairs, we found ourselves in a cavernous basement. The walls were lined with shelves filled with dusty ledgers and rusted tools. A single light bulb swung from the ceiling, barely illuminating the room. In the center was a large wooden table, its surface scratched and stained. Scattered across it were old photographs, yellowed with age. I picked one up, my stomach twisting as I recognized the hotel in its prime grand and full of life. But the faces of the people in the photograph had been scratched out, leaving only hollow outlines. Is this some kind of sick joke? Mia asked, her voice rising. Why would someone bring us here? Dr. Green didn't answer. Instead, he flipped through the ledgers on the shelves, his movements quick and deliberate. There's a pattern here, he muttered, almost to himself. This isn't random. Jacob stepped closer, his fists clenched. What do you know about this place? Dr. Green's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a loud crash echoed from the stairwell. The dragging sound was back, closer than ever. My chest tightened as I scanned the room for another way out. There was a second door, barely visible in the shadows, but it was padlocked. Jacob grabbed a rusted crowbar from one of the shelves and started prying at the lock. Hurry! I urged, my voice cracking as the sound grew louder. The light bulb flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second. When the light returned, the shadow was there, blocking the stairwell. It didn't move like something alive. Its form twisted and expanded, filling the space with a suffocating presence. The air grew colder, and a low growl reverberated through the room. Mia screamed, her flashlight falling to the floor and spinning wildly. Dr. Green backed away, his calm demeanor completely shattered. Jacob swore under his breath, slamming the crowbar against the lock with renewed desperation. Come on, he muttered. Come on. The lock gave way with a loud snap, and the door creaked open to reveal another hallway. This one lined with pipes that dripped water onto the cracked floor. We scrambled through, slamming the door shut behind us. Jacob wedged the crowbar into the handle, though I doubted it would hold for long. The shadow didn't follow immediately, but its presence lingered, a cold weight pressing down on us. That thing, I said, struggling to catch my breath. What does it want? Dr. Green hesitated, his expression guarded. It feeds on fear, he said finally, and on something else. Something darker. I narrowed my eyes. You know more than you're letting on. How do you know all this? He didn't answer. Jacob stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. You'd better start talking, Doc, because if you brought us here... I didn't, Dr. Green snapped, cutting him off. But I know what this place is. And if we don't work together, none of us are getting out alive. The hallway led us to another room. A small, cramped office with a single desk and a chair. On the desk was a journal, its leather cover cracked with age. Jacob opened it, his brow furrowing as he read. It's a log, he said. From the hotel manager? My stomach turned as he flipped through the pages, each one filled with entries detailing strange occurrences. Guests disappearing, doors locking on their own, staff members hearing voices. The final entry was scrawled in shaky handwriting. The keeper is here. It knows. What the hell is the keeper? Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. None of us had an answer, but as we stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in, the air growing heavier, with each passing second. Jacob slammed the journal shut and shoved it into his jacket. "We need to keep moving," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If that thing catches up to us—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to. We pressed on, the hallway narrowing until we were forced to walk single file. The pipes above us groaned as water dripped steadily onto the floor. Mia clung to her flashlight, the beam darting back and forth like she expected something to lunge at us from the shadows. I couldn't blame her. Every creak of the walls and every shift of the air made my pulse spike. The keeper wasn't far. It was as if we could all feel it, closing in, waiting for us to falter. Jacob stopped suddenly, holding up a hand to signal silence. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. We all froze, straining to listen. At first, I heard nothing but the drip of water and our own labored breathing. But then, faint and distant, came a sound laughter. It was high-pitched and distorted, echoing as though it were coming from everywhere at once. Mia's grip on my arm tightened, her nails digging into my skin. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It can't be real." The laughter grew louder, sharper, until it felt like needles in my ears. I pressed my hands to my head, desperate to block it out. But it was inside me now, rattling through my skull. Jacob shouted something I couldn't make out, his voice drowned out by the cacophony. Dr. Green stumbled, clutching the wall for support. "It's testing us," he said, his voice shaking. We have to keep moving. Don't let it break you." I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. The laughter turned into whispers, hissing words I couldn't understand, but felt in my bones. The hallway twisted ahead of us, and suddenly we were standing in front of another door. This one was different, heavier, made of dark wood with intricate carvings etched into its surface. The same symbol from the journal was burned into the center, stark and menacing. None of us wanted to touch it, but we had no choice. Jacob reached out first, his hand trembling as he pushed the door open. It groaned on its hinges, revealing a vast, empty ballroom. The floor was warped, the once polished wood buckled and splintered. Massive windows lined the far wall, but they were covered in grime, letting in no light. Chandeliers hung precariously above us, their crystals swaying despite the still air. But it wasn't the room that made my stomach drop. It was the figure standing in the center, waiting for us. It wasn't a shadow anymore. It was something more, something worse. Its form was tall and humanoid, but wrong in ways my mind couldn't fully process. Its face, or what passed for a face, was a void, featureless and pulsing with a faint red glow. The tattered remains of what might have once been clothing clung to its skeletal frame. It didn't move, but its presence filled the room, suffocating and oppressive. Mia whimpered, and Jacob stepped protectively in front of her. "You shouldn't be here," the keeper said, its voice like 1,000 whispers layered over one another. It didn't speak so much as force the words into our minds, invasive and inescapable. My knees buckled, and I had to clutch the doorframe to stay upright. "This is my domain," it continued. "You will not leave." Dr. Green stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. "We didn't come here by choice," he said. "Let us go and we'll leave you in peace." The keeper tilted its head as if amused. "Peace!" it echoed. "There is no peace here. Only betrayal. Only fear." Its gaze, or what I assumed was its gaze, shifted to me. "You know what must be done," it said. I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered. But even as I said the words, a sickening realization began to take root. The keeper wasn't lying. Somehow I did know. The room began to shift around us, the walls creaking as if alive. The windows shattered one by one, though no wind rushed in to fill the space. The floor groaned beneath our feet, the wood splintering and cracking. Jacob grabbed my arm, his grip firm. "Evelyn," he said urgently, "if you know something, you need to tell us. Now." I opened my mouth to respond, but the keeper moved for the first time, taking a single, deliberate step toward us. Dr. Green backed away, his calm demeanor crumbling. "We have to go," he said, his voice rising in panic. "There's nothing we can do here." But the door behind us was gone, replaced by a solid wall of stone. The keeper stopped, its head tilting again, as if savoring our fear. "The exit exists," it said, its voice reverberating through the room. "But only one may leave. Decide." My stomach twisted as the words sank in. It was a game, one designed to tear us apart. Mia's voice cracked as she spoke. We can't turn on each other. We have to find another way." Her words were desperate, pleading, but I saw the fear in her eyes. Jacob's jaw tightened, and he looked at Dr. Green with suspicion. "He knows something," he said. "He's been hiding it since the beginning. Haven't you, Doc?" Dr. Green didn't deny it. Instead, he glanced at the keeper, his expression unreadable. "I brought you here," Dr. Green admitted, his voice low. "I didn't want to, but I didn't have a choice. The keeper, it made me." The air seemed to grow colder, and Mia took a step back, her flashlight trembling in her hands. "You knew?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew what this place was? And you brought us here anyway?" Dr. Green's shoulders sagged under the weight of her accusation. "I thought I could bargain with it," he said. "I thought I could save myself." Jacob lunged at Dr. Green, pinning him against the wall. "You selfish bastard," he growled. "You brought us here to die." Dr. Green didn't resist. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and desperation. "Evelyn," he said, "you have to choose. The keeper won't let us all leave. If you don't make a choice, it'll kill us all." My heart pounded as I looked at the others, Jacob, Mia, Dr. Green, all of them terrified, all of them looking to me. The keeper took another step forward, its form towering over us. "Decide," it commanded, "or I will decide for you." My mind raced. I didn't want to sacrifice anyone, but the alternative was unthinkable. Jacob met my gaze, his expression softening. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "you can't save all of us. If it has to be someone, let it be me." Mia shook her head violently. "No, there has to be another way." Tears blurred my vision as Jacob stepped toward the keeper, his movement steady and resolute. "Take me," he said. "Let them go." The keeper paused, its head tilting as if considering his offer. Then, slowly, it reached out with an inhumanly long arm, its shadowy fingers curling around Jacob. He didn't scream. He just looked back at me, a faint smile on his lips, before the keeper pulled him into the darkness. And then he was gone. The wall behind us crumbled, revealing a narrow path leading into the misty forest beyond. Mia and I stumbled through, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The keeper didn't follow. The cold wind bit at my skin, and for a moment, I thought we were safe. But then I looked at Mia. She was holding her crumpled note, her eyes wide with horror. The words had changed. "You can never leave." My blood ran cold as I looked around, realizing the mist wasn't clearing. The forest wasn't endless. It looped back into the hotel. We weren't free. Not yet.